All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mr. Coker's Neighborhood. I'm here with my friend, Mr. Eric J. Vasquez, who is a film director and a friend of mine. And this is something that we've been, well, for me at least, it's been a struggle to put together because there's been delay after delay with my iPhone. But here we are in present time, and I think in much better circumstances, we're able to finally do this. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this video is to talk about what exactly is cinema. And the reason why I wanted to make this video was because talking with Eric and him being a friend of mine, there was a lot of in-depth conversation, especially with the wealth of knowledge that he has being a filmmaker and going to film school. And he's gonna elaborate on that in a bit. But with a lot of the recent comments that have been made by Martin Scorsese and even with Francis Ford Coppola, there's a lot of dialogue being exchanged about what's happening with the film industry and what exactly is cinema. And given that a lot of millennials and a lot of Gen Xers out there are just having a lot of dialogue, and it seems like that there's a lot of misconception about what exactly cinema is, and I think people have forgotten. And the reason why I wanted to do this with Eric is because he fully knows exactly what that is in greater detail. So Eric, I just want to say thank you for doing this. What is cinema?
Thank you for having me. What is cinema? Cinema is the culmination of everything that is art. So it's film, photography, it's paintings, it's drawings, it's music, it's everything that falls under the arts umbrella. It all comes together and it creates a motion picture. And I think anything that plays in a theater you can generally call cinema, but there's levels, as they say, levels to the game. And the one thing that Scorsese said when he was referring to Marvel films as not cinema, I get where he's coming from. He's from a different time. But I feel like there's perhaps maybe the smallest of misunderstanding. I myself don't necessarily consider Marvel films like ultimate cinema, but I do think that Marvel represents something to the equivalent of fast food cinema. And it's, you know what you're getting into when you go see one. It's just like going to a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Taco Bell. It's readily available, it's there, it does its job, and then that's it, no more. And I think that's primarily what Marvel films do. And I think Scorsese was kind of speaking more on a larger scale. Do they challenge your beliefs? Do they challenge your way of life? Do they make you reflect? That type of thing. So that's more or less what I think Scorsese was trying to get, but people want to blow things up.
Right.
So, oh well.
Yeah. It's just been very interesting just to see just exactly just how people just blow things out of proportion. People they read those comments and then it's like with one sentence that he said, it's like they disregard everything that he did before.
Yeah.
And they're like, this guy's criticizing my love and my passion for all these films. How dare he say that? But people confuse, just because it's a film doesn't necessarily mean what cinema is, or at least what he was trying to say.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know who you are, what is your background, and what got you into becoming a film director?
Well, I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, which is the border town next to Juarez, Mexico. It's the tip of Texas that also borders New Mexico. And my exposure to film happened very early, you know, your typical Disney films and whatnot. But filmmaking, what got me interested into filmmaking was Jurassic Park in 1993. I had never been to the movies before. I had just watched VHS and everything else. And one day my parents they just took me to the theater. And I think like if you have a really good memory, you know, the first time you go to the theater is it's a very profound experience. And for me, I remember going in and everything was literally larger than life. The snack stand was huge, the popcorn was huge, the drinks were huge. And they had arcade games in the front, like back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And we'd go in and the seats they weren't stadium seatings like they are today. They were more, you know, on an incline.
Right.
So if someone taller sat in front of you, you were screwed.
Yeah.
So that was my experience, and I remember the trailers came, and it was all so new and it was so big, and it was almost overwhelming in a way. The sound, the image, all that. And this is back when everything was still projected on film. So it was a beautiful experience, kind of like seeing the cigarette burns and the film scratches. But then the movie actually started, and that opening really just left a huge impression on me, and obviously I was there for the ride. For a lot of people that are my age, maybe even a little older, like to them, it's like, oh, Jurassic Park was this scary movie. I had nightmares. I didn't. I loved it. I was in for the ride. I didn't have nightmares. I ate it up, you know, like a kid with candy. And that's when I decided I wanted to make movies. I didn't know that I wanted to be a director, but I knew I wanted to make movies. And when you're a kid, you think that the actors are the ones that make the movie because they're in the movie. So I thought, oh, I want to be an actor. So for the early part of my life, I was acting, did some school theater, and did some local theater. And then around the age of 10, I started actually paying attention to the credits. And that's when I started noticing Steven Spielberg's name pop up a lot in my VHS tapes. And I was asking, well, who's this guy? Who's Steven Spielberg?
Yeah.
And some people that knew about film, you know, more than I did at the time, it's like, oh, that's the director. And I say, well, who's the director? What does he do? And that's when I looked into it, and I found out what the director actually does, and I thought, that's what I want to do. That's it. So my whole focus switched. It went from acting to literally directing. And so from the age of 10 is when I decided I want to be an actor. I want to be a director. And I stopped acting. Not entirely, but I quit on a regular basis.
Right.
And just focused mainly on directing. So I just kind of carried that over through middle school, carried it into high school, used it to substitute essays for some assignments. Took that into college. I went to film school and graduated, and you know, now I've been in this industry 10 years. You know, just trying to land that spot. You know, it's just one of those things where it's a grind, and it's at times maybe even a little demoralizing, but if it's something you really want, you know, you just gotta get it, you know. And for me, could I have been a doctor? Yes. Could I have been a lawyer? Yes. Could I have been an engineer? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a filmmaker, I wanted to be a director. So for me, it's just one of those, I'm not gonna stop until I get it.
Right.
And then when I get it, I'm just gonna keep going with it. So
Very cool.
that's been the director journey, kind of in a nutshell.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, you had mentioned some of your favorite, filmmakers like Spielberg. Is there any more filmmakers that you absolutely love, and what are your dream projects that you would like to do?
Some of my favorite filmmakers, there's so many, but Off the top of my head, I take a lot of inspiration from directors like Andrei Tarkovsky and Stanley Kubrick and David Fincher. Recently, I'm really getting into Robert Eggers. I was a huge fan of The Lighthouse, and I was a fan of The Witch. Todd Phillips made some interesting choices with The Joker, and I'm a huge fan of Reed Morano, who was a cinematographer, and she transitioned into directing, and she's made a huge name for herself. One of the better female filmmakers that I've seen recently. And I'm also a huge lover of John Carpenter and Wes Craven. I'm a big horror fan. I love horror. And so this might be blasphemous, but in my eyes, you can't love horror and not like John Carpenter. You have to like John Carpenter if you love horror. So, there's so many, but off the top of my head, those are the ones that I look up to, and I always revisit their work whenever I need a little pick-me-up, or if I need some type of creative adrenaline shot. But there's so many, Robert Zemeckis, Sergio Leone, Akira Kurosawa, Charlie Chaplin. I'm a huge Buster Keaton fan. I love Buster Keaton. And even Jackie Chan, when he was back in his Hong Kong days, when he was directing his action films or his kung fu films, Bruce Lee, even the very little directing Bruce Lee did was phenomenal. I really wish he could have finished The Game of Death. I really do. But there's so many, but I would say, if there's any directors, if there's just a handful of directors whose work I revisit constantly, it would be Tarkovsky, Kubrick, Fincher, Buster Keaton, and Spielberg.
Yeah. Awesome. And I know Jurassic Park is your all-time favorite movie. What would be some other ones that you would say are your favorite? And if, let's say, it was somebody gave you the keys to unlimited outcomes of, you can have whatever outcome you can choose in terms of the films that you would like to make, like dream projects, what would those be?
Well, Jurassic Park definitely is one of them. I think anyone who wants to be a director, at one point or another, they always want to do something superhero related, whether it's inspired by the comic books, or if it's an original, or anywhere that falls in between. But if I'm being honest, aside from doing something that's Jurassic Park related, or directly Jurassic Park, or world as it is today, definitely Batman. Batman's my favorite superhero. So I would love to do something Batman related. I love the Ninja Turtles. So I would totally entertain doing something Ninja Turtle related.
Yeah, I could totally see you do something like that.
Yeah, big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan. I take it back a little bit more to the early days when it was a little darker.
Yeah.
Not to say that it can't be kid friendly or family friendly. Right. That's the word I use, is family friendly. I don't really, family friendly is, you could still be dark and accessible. So that's that. I would say Batman, Ninja Turtles, Jurassic Park / World, whatever they want to call it. Right. Would I do Star Wars? Sure. Let's talk.
Yeah.
I'm the type that doesn't necessarily, I don't want to jump into just everything that's offered. There's definite touchstones of my life that were inspired by particular films, Star Wars being one, Jurassic another, and so on. But there are some things that just probably shouldn't be touched. Okay. No matter how much the kid and or ego want to, jump at it. But I would say for sure, because I think you could tell Batman stories from here to eternity. And I think the same is true with Ninja Turtles. It's a little trickier with Jurassic, but I think as long as you're open to something new regarding the story itself, maybe even adapting the novel, because the book and the novel are, the book and the movie are two very different animals. So if we maybe went back to the source material, I think there's something there that can, entice people's appetites for more stories down the line. But that's off the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure there's more out there. Terminator, sure. I'm down to do a Terminator movie if one ever landed on me.
Yeah, we had different experiences with Terminator Dark Fate. However, at the end of seeing Dark Fate, speaking from my perspective, I did a review on Terminator Dark Fate. You can actually go back to a previous video to see what my thoughts were on that. And I completely was, after I saw Terminator Dark Fate, I was in my mind just going, fuck this, I'm done with it. However, I will say though, after exchanging differences of perspective on Terminator Dark Fate, and given that you said you would want to do a Terminator Dark Fate, now I don't want to say anything of it because I do think your idea for a Terminator movie is actually brilliant. So I actually don't want to share that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I really want, if the opportunity presented itself and I met James Cameron, or you met James Cameron, or if I knew somebody that was looking for an idea, I would say, hold your horses. I know somebody that has a really good idea. Somebody, like I said, I'm somebody that was at the end of Dark Fate, fuck this franchise, I don't want to see any more of it. However, the idea that you had to do another Terminator movie actually really wants me to get it made someday.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Makes me know I'm on the right path.
Yeah, so I really want to see that. And I think you had also mentioned too that you would want to remake, if you had to remake, it was a John Carpenter film.
Yeah, if given the opportunity to remake a John Carpenter film, I love the movie to death, and it's already been remade, but I thought they didn't really do that good of a job. Is The Fog. I love Halloween. I love They Live, but there's something about The Fog. It's so simple. It's elegant. It's moody. It's got this ghostly chill.
Yeah.
There's something about that. I think there's more to that particular mythology that Carpenter built that I'm sure not even he thought that it could, expand into something more. But I like what he did. I love the movie already. So if given the opportunity to remake it or give it somewhat of a contemporary reboot, keeping some of the original DNA, I would not hesitate to do that one. So that's a remake for you.
Awesome, very, very cool. As far as, let's say, over the next 5 years, I know that there are some like you already mentioned film projects, but there was like a Netflix special that you said that you wanted to work on as well too.
Yeah, there's a few of them. Because in my head, if the perfect scenario existed, I would make a movie, and then for 2 or 3 years I would direct television, and then I would do another movie, and then do another 2 or 3 years of television, and that would just be my preferred trajectory of directing from here until I die. So as far as television goes, on Netflix right now, I would love to get my hands on the new Selena series, and that's just because I'm from Texas.
Right.
If you're from Texas, you automatically, you eat, you live, you breathe, you sing, you dance Selena. Selena is your ride home, to school, to work, to the mall. Selena was everything growing up. So in a weird way, if you're from Texas, you almost feel this responsibility and this obligation to do Selena justice, to do that legacy justice. And so that's a show that I would love to direct an episode or two. The other ones are Mindhunter, which is a David Fincher production. I think that's a brilliant show. That might be the best new show right now. And I know some people might say Game of Thrones, or they might say something else. But I personally think Mindhunter is the most cohesive, the most technical, the most precise piece of filmmaking that you will see on television or film. So that's another one. And then the last two on Netflix that I you know, they're just fun for me is Glow, which is the female wrestling show, or it's based on the female wrestling show of the 80s. I'm a huge wrestling fan. Grew up watching wrestling my whole life, so that one that's for the kid in me to like get my hands on something that's wrestling related. And the last show is this coming of age Latino tale called On My Block, which I think is a beautiful story about these teenagers growing up in East LA, just kind of going through just going through life, you know, and there's an adventure that's kind of, and it's kind of a Goonies adventure kind of thrown in the middle, you know, having to do with, you know, treasure and cholos and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's something that I like to have fun with those.
That's very cool. So like in the next 5 years, do you have like any specific? Is there like a short term, like midterm and a long term goal that you have?
I would say it's kind of it's not solidified, but short term would be to put out more content, and that content is more short form. Right now, I'm working on a couple of web series of my own because I've worked on things that aren't mine. So I want to really get those out of my head first before I focus on my things. But I have at least 2 or 3 web series that I want to focus on to put out, just to get myself busy, just to put my name out there, work with different actors that I want to work with different people, some different talent behind the camera. You know, just sharpen the directing tools, and then also, you know, I want to put my producer's hat on first for a few things and give opportunities to other people that I know that want to be directors or want to be DPs and so on, you know. So that I would say that's short term. Midterm would be to do my first feature, and I'm in development of that right now. Yes. And I've been in development with that for on and off over the last maybe 3 or 4 years. You know, like we take a few months to talk about some ideas, jot things down, throw things on the wall, see what sticks, you know, and then, you know, we do that for a few weeks, and then, you know, we don't talk about it again for another year or two, and then we come back to it. So that's one thing that that would be midterm, you know, do something that's relatively low budget. You know, there's 2 ways of doing it. We're either doing the Robert Rodriguez thing where we shoot a feature for $7 or $8 grand, you know, and do everything ourselves and see what happens, you know, throw caution to the wind. Yeah. Or we do something a little bit higher, less than $1 million, but anywhere between that 50 grand to 150 to 250 grand. So it's a little bit more ambitious. But, you know, after that, you know, you just you do the festival circuit and see what sticks. And then long term would be hopefully through the efforts of all of the short term and the midterm, is that I would be able to get into television directing and use that as essentially my day job. You know, like get on TV shows, both on HBO Max or HBO itself, or Showtime, Netflix, you know, ABC, NBC, whatever, you know, and do that for a while until I'm able to get a much higher, I guess more sophisticated feature off the ground.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So.
Is it a perfect world scenario? Maybe, but I'd say if there was some type of short, mid, and long-term goal, I would say that would be it.
Yeah. I'm really gonna try to campaign somehow, some way for you to get that Terminator movie, and I would really love it. I didn't even think about it about Ninja Turtles, but hearing you say that, I could totally see that. Do you have like an idea of how you would approach that in terms of Ninja Turtles?
Like, story or technically?
Like both.
A little bit of both. Story-wise, I would really go back to the source material, which is the comics, you know, and try to lift things from those early those early comics that they did for the first movie.
Right.
You know, originally the first movie was supposed to be very different, and then they kind of took it away from the director and chopped it up into what it is today, which is still a classic.
Right.
But I would say that my version of a Ninja Turtles film would be more in line with the first film, with the darker elements that were taken out, put back in.
Okay.
You know, without trying to get too specific here. But technically, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know if it's the cool thing to say these days, but I do truly feel this way, is we need to go back to practical effects.
Amen. A fucking men, bro.
You know.
A fucking men.
I believe in CGI. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's done wonders for this industry. But there's certain stories, there's certain movies that just require tangibility, you know. They need something for the actors to work off of, you know. And as an audience member, I like to believe that what I'm looking at, I can touch it. You know, I can sense it, I can smell it, you know, I can get a feel for it. And with the last Ninja Turtles films, although I did think that the last one that came out was somewhat entertaining, you know, it still didn't feel as tangible as the first one or the second one. So I would definitely go back to practical puppets and animatronics for the Ninja Turtles. I'd put an actor in a suit, we'd put the head on, there would be puppeteers, you know, and remote controllers, you know, with the eyes and the mouth and everything. You know, I would go back to that aesthetic for sure with Ninja Turtles.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things that I appreciate about being friends with you and always being able to pick your brain, and I think this is the mark of somebody as a filmmaker who really knows what they're talking about, especially because you beat my head over it a lot, is talking about what makes a good film. And I'm educating myself in terms of how a story works, you know, from beginning to end. Because a lot of times I think people get caught up of like what makes a good movie versus a bad movie just based on how it looks like or how it feels like. But there is an intelligence and, as you say, and looking at things objectively and subjectively. And if I say that a lot, by the way, if I say objectively or subjectively, credit where it's due, I get it from Eric. So
sorry.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like when you, let's say, a producer approaches you, or let's say like hypothetically, let's say James Cameron comes to you and he says, hey, you know, Eric, you know, I heard you have this idea of doing another Terminator movie, or a producer of Ninja Turtles, or you know, people listening, they come at you and they go, okay, how would you approach this type of property? How would you go with that?
Well, if it was Terminator, and James Cameron said, what would you do? You know, it's a fine line to walk, because Cameron was involved with Dark Fate, and full disclosure, I liked Dark Fate. I liked it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I liked it. But he was involved with it. My approach to him I would probably say, Sir Cameron, James, Jim. I really admire the work that Tim Miller and Goyer and Rhodes, I really love the work that they all brought to the table. But I do think that we've come to a point in the franchise where we might have to end it. Bring some finality to it. Now, one could argue that the one thing that happens in Dark Fate, which I won't spoil for those who haven't seen it, the one thing that happens in Dark Fate, some could argue that was a finality and it opened up to something new. I don't think so, because we still have certain characters involved that are going to carry over. What I would say is to James Cameron is, let's really bring a finality to this story. We know 5 or 8 or 10 years down the line, they're gonna reboot this or they're gonna remake it. Let that be their problem. They could come up with an entirely new mythology based on all the bones that we leave here under the ground. What I would say is, let's really end it. Let's bring a finality. Let's bring everything full circle. Let's not ignore this past, this history, because I do think that there has been some merit in most, if not all, of the Terminator films.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
I love the first one. I think it's still the best one. I love Judgment Day. I enjoy Rise of the Machines. Is it as good as the second one? No. Is it as good as the first one? Not even close. But I enjoy it. I think there's some good ideas in there. It's the same thing with Salvation. What I admire the most about Salvation is that it brought new ideas to the table. It just didn't execute them as strongly as I think they wanted to. Same thing with Genesis. I thought Genesis had good ideas. I didn't think Genesis was that good of a movie, but I thought that it brought good ideas. And I enjoyed them all, you know. Dark Fate, the same thing. I enjoyed Dark Fate more than Rise of the Machines, over Salvation, and Genesis, but it still pales in comparison to the first and to the second film. So my words to Cameron are, let's not ignore this history. Let's not ignore this past like all these other sequels have said and promised to do. You know, Salvation sort of said, you know, we're kind of not, you know, gonna acknowledge the third film, even though you have similar characters in this film that you had in the third. And then Genesis came along and said, oh, well, the third doesn't exist and Salvation doesn't exist. And then Dark Fate comes in and says, oh, well, 3, Salvation, and Genesis don't exist at all. I would say, no, they all exist. Let's bring all of that full circle. Obviously, you know, per your request, I don't want to give out details.
I don't, because what you described to me was what I thought the best way to give it finale, and at the same time, a way to really give fan service. And that's why I really want to advocate, because what you do pretty much emphasizes why I love Terminator. For me, personally, I know everybody has a different interpretation of that. But so I guess what you're saying is story. Your approach to it just depends on what it is and what, you know, depending on what that is, what if there is already something established, what has been before, or if you're completely starting from scratch. Let's say, for example, with like Ninja Turtles, how do you define like a story? Let's say you're rebooting Ninja Turtles. How is your approach to story with that? I mean, I know you talked about going to the source material, but how do you develop a skeleton of a story without giving it too much away? Right.
So with Ninja Turtles, that's different because each of those films kind of work on their own as episodic, kind of their own. They're their own little worlds. They're all standalones in their own right. Like there's not really any crossover from each of the films. You know, even the newest ones, they all kind of felt standalone. So there's less back work that goes into a Ninja Turtles film. So I would definitely compile at least 3 or 5 of the best Ninja Turtles comic titles, and I would use that as my foundation to start at least the basic treatment for what could be a new Ninja Turtles movie. And right now, what they're doing right now in terms of franchises is that they're trying to plan out the trilogy ahead of time.
Right.
They're saying like, with Star Wars, it was, you know, Force Awakens, it's going to be Force Awakens, and that's going to lead into this film, which was The Last Jedi, and Last Jedi is going to lead into this film, which is The Rise of Skywalker, and they all have to connect in some shape, way, or form. And it's the same thing with the new Jurassic World franchise, where Colin Trevorrow has said that it's gonna feel more like an arc of stories versus episodic movies. And although I totally get that approach and I respect it, I feel like that approach in a way kind of jumps the gun with the audience, because we still don't know if the audience is going to come see these movies.
Right.
You know, we have to give them a reason to come and pay their hard-earned money,
Right.
you know, to buy the popcorn, buy the drink, buy the snacks, buy the ticket, you know. And so we don't know that. So I'd rather not assume that the audience is gonna be there, so we should plan out 2 and 3 ahead of time.
Right.
I would just focus on making one great Ninja Turtles movie. Leave some breadcrumbs there for sequels. Essentially, what I would do with Ninja Turtles is very similar to how Nolan approached Batman Begins. Now, Nolan knew that he would make other movies if the audience demanded it, which was kind of genius in a way. Because Batman Begins could have been one Batman film. It could have been. It wasn't designed that way in the grand scheme of things, but the way that it was presented, the way that it was, designed from beginning to end, felt like, well, if we don't get a sequel, this is perfect. And all he needed was one scene, one moment. And it's when Batman flips the calling card and it's the Joker.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That can be interpreted as ambiguous of an ending, and it could be interpreted as part 2, the sequel. In part 2, we're gonna see Joker. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So my approach would be similar to that, where I focus on making one great Ninja Turtles movie based on 3 or 5 of its greatest source material.
Yeah.
You know, and use that as a foundation.
Yeah.
And then if the audience shows up, then let's talk about the sequels.
I think that's something that's so simple yet so brilliant. And it reminds me of how people today are trying to replicate what Kevin Feige did with Marvel. And I think just approaching it with that, you can't go wrong. It reminds me, like, when I see other filmmakers or other franchises try to do what Kevin Feige does, it reminds me of RoboCop 2, when you have the first RoboCop, but then they want to make they want to replicate that, and the next thing you know, you see all these different cyborgs come out, and it's just a disaster after disaster after disaster, because they're trying to imitate, something that was made from elsewhere. But I think that approach, if you're going to start a franchise, I think you can't go wrong. And given the how you approach it, with the budget, that's above my awareness in terms of how to put all that together. But you seem to have pretty much have that. So
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, but I think we pretty much have everything covered in terms of what is cinema, your background, where you're going, and if people want to find you, what is the best way to contact you?
People could find me instantly on Instagram at EJV101. Again, that is EJV, which are my initials, EJV101. You could also find me on Twitter, EJV_101. I'm on Twitter. I'm on it, but I don't get on it as much as far as like posting or anything. But Instagram, I'm on. Instagram's kind of my thing. So you could find me on Instagram, EJV101, Twitter, EJV_101. And stop by, say hi. Make fun of my pictures or my videos.
Very cool. Well, again, I appreciate you, Mr. Vasquez. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for tuning in, watching this, and aside from that, I will see you on the next one.